It's very unfortunate that Zapdos gets the blame for so much wrong with the way that we play. Zapdos is just doing its job. Zapdos isn't the real issue of Unite's match deciding system. Well, let's look at how Zapdos actually works more mechanically. The team who actually beats Zapdos has every active member receive 20 points of AS energy, with the person who KO'd Zapdos themselves receiving 30 points. The opposing team being stunned by the lightning that targets every single one of them, and if hit they are stunned for a few seconds. And has a 30-second free goal scoring period, as well as some amount of healing and HP restoration effects. On its own, this is a minimum of 110 points handed out to the team that manages to KO. This is a maximum, assuming every member is still active and they do not have a full score already. In reality, this is actually a significantly overestimate, because more likely than not, there will be some members of the KOing team that are themselves presently KO'd or already have a full score. Including the double points that the end 2 minutes of the game applies, this gives a maximum Zapdos given score of 220 points. Which in reality isn't that much. I mean, that's not enough to decide an entire game. There have been games where the difference between one team and another at any point prior to the 2 minutes is actually greater than that. If a team can sufficiently overscore prior in the match, that 220 is relatively meaningless. And even it's possible to overscore that post-Zapdos by the team that failed to KO Zapdos. So why do people complain about Zapdos if all it gives you is 220 points? With teams scoring well over 400 points to post-Zapdos score. That's a score and value that is nearly insurmountable for almost any team, because every player will have a maximum score capacity of around 50 points, and it will take a very long time to score if they didn't manage to KO Zapdos, leading them to be easily defended and pushed back by the defending teams. And that's where the root of the issue stems from. The issue isn't actually Zapdos, it's players hoarding points going into the Zapdos arena with a full score thing, and everyone doing a massive team fight for Zapdos. It's players hoarding points and the way players react to Zapdos' arrival. But if you guys want to see more of these discussion videos, please do not forget to leave a like on that video and subscribe. It really helps us make more of these things. Thank you all. Wonderful out there. Now, on to the video. We have to remember what the point of Zapdos' inclusion is, first and foremost. Zapdos is a comeback mechanic. It is designed to allow one team that is potentially losing to potentially come back. But even then, it still is not on itself a game decider. There are 3 scenarios that Zapdos actually does. One is if you are presently in the lead, it allows you to secure the lead. If you are presently behind, it allows you to gain the lead. But the third one is if you had the lead early game and lost it later in the game, it allows you to regain that lead. Those are the 3 instances that Zapdos actually allows. Though there is also the 4th option of taking Zapdos and just doing nothing with it. Or rather, nothing being done with it. Or regain the lead if it was lost despite having the advantage early game because a coordinated team was able to make a comeback mid-game. Zapdos does exactly what it is supposed to. So where's the problem? It's complaining about a mechanic doing its intended purpose. Again, a 220 point bump purely applied by Zapdos is indeed a solid boost that can help turn a match, but it is not on its own a match decider. If that is enough to decide a game, that's a pretty close score that, well, the opposing team could easily return the lead on. So it is nowhere near enough to definitively decide a game. An opposing team of between 15 to 25 points per person could easily make up that gap if, say, the formerly in the lead team that had now been overscored was ahead by 100 points prior, even less is actually needed to allow the opposing team to regain the lead after the enemy Zapdos scored. Purely applying the Zapdos benefit puts any team very solidly in counter-scoring comeback range. But this is where the second part of the problem actually comes into play, and what turns Zapdos from a comeback mechanic into what we refer to as a game decider. It's tunnel vision and the reaction of players to Zapdos being taken by the opposing team. Most players, even before the Zapdos fight, and this is something that I am guilty of myself doing, chiding teammates for going for double scores during Zapdos, when this is actually the point. The double score portion is 2 minutes, but with current playstyles, it is almost exclusively around a minute, or at least 30 seconds to a minute and a half, focus on the Zapdos team fight or the team fight over Zapdos, and really nothing else. If Zapdos is taken early, there is some counter score attempts made, potentially by some teams, but the overwhelming focus is the Zapdos fight is all that matters in those 2 minutes, no matter how long or short. Either it is attempting to beat the opposing team, bodyguarding Zapdos from the other team, or trying to take Zapdos yourself, rather than going for sneaky scores. But going for those sneak scores actually applies huge amounts of pressure to the opposing team. Because if they see, oh, someone's going to try and go score on us, well, maybe they're all trying to push and they're not going to go for Zapdos, and then they can overscore us easily. Or it can function as a distraction, something I have actually done many times as something like a Trevenant, drawing 2 or even 3 potential numbers away, at minimum possibly 1. So either way, it's a win-win scenario. If no one comes for me, I get some scores in, I can sneak around behind, push some team enemies away from the Zapdos battle, or 1 to 3 of them come to try to fight me, expecting a horde of people to be protecting a goal score, and no one goes for Zapdos while my team just melts it. That's how those sneaky, cheeky scores can completely flip a game. And is actually the point of the double score system. It's not supposed to be, we exclusively focus Zapdos. That is what turns Zapdos into a game decider when it's meant to be a comeback mechanic. It isn't supposed to be the major function. Major focus, not function. However, because this idea of, by the general player base, to go on your own, try and get some scores, and draw the team away from the Zapdos arena is heavily frowned upon because, people just chiding their teammates for it, it turns Zapdos into an end-all be-all. The first half of this, second part issue is that the other team, the first half of this issue is actually the reaction by, say, my team when the enemy team KOs Zapdos. If the enemy team KOs Zapdos, my team immediately defaults into protect the goals mode, when this is the wrong decision. All they need to do is get into the goal, press a button, and they've already done everything. It doesn't matter if you KO them, it doesn't matter how low their health is. Defending the goals is completely useless when almost every someone has a dash to bypass walls and quickly close distance. If a team exclusively focuses on defending, then this will open up the opportunity to prevent scoring yourself. The first half of this second part issue is the reaction by a team when the opposing team actually lands the KO on Zapdos. Everyone defaults into defense mode from the goals. This in most cases, there are some cases where this actually is the right decision if most of the enemy team is heavily weakened and your team is generally more at full strength, then that is the right decision, but that is the very, very rare chance. In most circumstances, falling back and defending is the wrong decision due to almost every Pokemon having gap-closing dashes, or the eject button, designed to get through the enemy barricade as quickly as possible, because all they gotta do is get into the goal zone, press that button, and their score is done. If you land the KO after that, no matter how much health they have left, none of that matters. What this also does is this allows them to get big scores against you using their hoarded up 50 points to land 100-point scores. While you are defending your goals, and not scoring. If 2 or 3 people manage to get their hundreds in, even if they manage to get in 80 points, that is 240 points right there, while everyone on your team is at your base defending. Once they score, they're either KO'd or they immediately head back to their base and start defending, preventing you from effectively counter-scoring. That is where the one most effective way to actually beat Zapdos is actually done. Go counter-score. If they're all rushing into your base to score, they're not protecting their own base. Meaning, the reaction shouldn't be defend ours, it should be attack theirs. Because they can't score at the same time they're defending. Generally, yes, someone will possibly head back to base to defend their goals themselves. This is generally a very smart play. But most of the time, people who understand counter-scoring are the only ones that will do this. That is the most effective way to actually prevent Zapdos being taken from being negated and overturned. But the problem with that is not the reaction most players have, because their general default is protect our goals, not attack theirs. Again, if everyone's scoring at the same time, no one can really stop anyone from scoring. Because that instant score potential that Zapdos actually gives them, it makes almost every defense opportunity against Zapdos teams completely pointless. Knockback, slowdown things can easily be negated by full heal, eject button, or any dashes. And even now, many Pokemon actually do have hindrance negation or hindrance immunity abilities that are on cooldowns. That is a fight that they have the complete advantage in. The only way to win that fight is actually not participate in it. It is counterscore. Now, that is not to say that counterscoring will always be capable of defeating Zapdos. There are definitely times where it is not enough. If you do not have enough points to equal everything that they scored in, then yes, it will not work. But that's a lost match anyway. So, at the very least, you did try to defeat Zapdos. You made the full mile to try to stop them from winning, but they still won because, well, they didn't win. But if you just, say, don't do anything of that, you just try to protect their base, they score anyway, you lose by a mile. And it feels worse because, well, oh, they got Zapdos and they won, when that realistically is not the case. Say one team ends with 605 points. Okay, but they got that because they all dunked in their scores, and you tried defending your score. You tried defending your goals from them while Zapdos was up. But they still got in their points anyway. They'd get that 605 points regardless if you were there or not, in almost every case. But if, say, you have 400 points on your side, and 3 or 4 of your guys go over to their side, slam in, 30s or even 20s, 20s or even 30s, maybe a 35, well, you can overtake that and overscore them. Because they were busy scoring on your side, they couldn't protect their own goals. Again, it doesn't always work if you are behind by too far. They will still be able to win, but at least it is the most effective and reliable way of defeating a Zapdos score game, is to, well, counterscore. This is something that friends and I have done in ranked numerous times, and I have tallied up the matches. It has about a 60% to 70% chance of actually working. These are matches where we did not beat Zapdos, but we ended up winning the game. And we also looked at matches where we got Zapdos and the enemy team actually managed to win, and in those cases, they generally managed to beat us by counter-scoring. It is a highly effective system. And the reason why we can actually do this is let's take a look at matches excluding Zapdos. So, the preceding 8 minutes. If Zapdos was not a comeback mechanic and one team was losing pretty drastically, say they had an over 300 point deficit, say you got all the Rotoms, you either sniped Rotom or you sniped all the Dreadnoughts, you demolish them in every team fight because either you're better at playing, or you guys just got lucky with maybe picking off one of them first and someone just didn't come to a team fight, or just simply getting lucky with the Dreadnought steal or the Rotom steal and managing to just get in points far before them. They could even potentially be higher leveled, but because you managed to get things like Rotom or get in scores when they were not around, you were able to overscore them preliminarily. Well, that's a game where they are actually farther ahead of you in terms of levels and generally things that matter a little more than the score, because if you're lower level than them but you have more points, well, they'll demolish you in a team fight. What this means is, when it comes to the Zapdos fight, if you're 2-3 levels down below them, they will utterly demolish you. They realistically deserve to win that because they will beat you in an out-and-out battle if you force it into being an out-and-out battle. That is a big mistake that sometimes people do. Alternatively, if for the other team, they are higher level, it feels really crap when you lose and you are lower level, but you have higher score, and then they suddenly get Zapdos and beat you, but you were only getting scores in because, well, eventually they were going for Dreadnought, you got scores in while they were focusing on actual more important objectives, or you got all the Rotoms and massively overscored them, and they were focusing on getting levels. They were focusing on a significantly more important objective long-term rather than the short-term Rotom scores. Or again, could just got lucky with those Rotom snipes, or getting in sneaky scores. However, think about what it feels like for the opposing team. You guys are higher level. You demolish the enemy in team fights prior to Zapdos, but yet they keep scoring. You realistically should be ahead of them, but because they just simply get lucky with everything else, they're beating you. Then Zapdos comes in. You steamroll this lower level team that got lucky. That feels vindicating because, well, you earned that Zapdos win. You were the much more prepared, much more functional team in terms of the more teamwork, cohesive, necessary parts. You got the Dreadnought, you had the advantage. And the Zapdos win shows you had that advantage. That feels very good for them because they earned that Zapdos win. Whereas the other team, again, possibly got lucky, possibly just got some sneak scores in. Probably maybe one person was off getting scores while the rest of the team was doing a 4v5 by Dreadnought and getting demolished. Again, the team that was higher level that did go for the objectives more frequently, I don't want to say deserved the win more, but they make a significantly better case that the win should have gone to them naturally because they were, well, focusing objectives. But we're just simply behind on score because they couldn't score while focusing on those major objectives. And yes, I'm not gonna lie, it feels incredibly annoying if you are actually ahead. You got the Dreadnoughts, you actually even got all the Rotom, and this Eldegoss just comes out of nowhere, boop, throws out one basic attack, lands a KO because of luck, and then you steamroll from there. That feels horrible. That has actually happened to me in Ranked once. But note what I said there. Once. That sticks with me even 6, 7, 8 months later because of how infuriating it was. But that was the only time it ever happened. The annoyances stick with us longer than the times we succeed. We remember the losses more than we remember the wins. So our memories will intentionally bias us against them like Zapdos. We may have won many more times by actually not getting Zapdos, but we only remember the times we lost because the opposing team got Zapdos. And the same is true for them. They don't remember, oh yeah, we won without Zapdos, but we lost because they got Zapdos. It's the way your memory plays tricks on you because it didn't stick out that much. Again, that Eldegoss match sticks out with me more than the probably 3,000 matches I've actually played other than that. The other thing about that whole Eldegoss thing is that when we pull the same thing off against opposing teams, we celebrate it. they feel the same way that we feel when we get screwed over because we do the same thing to them. It's very much the thing about players complaining about something doing its job when we celebrate when it does its job in favor of us, but we curse it when it does its job, but it does that against us. Again, it's very much a player perception thing. You really can't play both sides of something like this, especially when you rejoice when you actually get it. In short, Zapdos is pretty much the victim of a mechanic working just the way it should. However, because of the way players react to it and the player mentality, it gets a bit of a bad name. They get tunnel visioned, they blank on certain things, and players do, well, make mistakes that are the way the game really isn't intended to be. So a mechanic is given the blame rather than a whole systemic breakdown that is the problem. There are multiple factors at play that make Zapdos into a game decider because we put it into being a game decider. We put so much emphasis on Zapdos that it turns into a game decider when it really never should have been. It's a comeback mechanic. Changing Zapdos would be the wrong thing to do. As it stands, it's actually perfectly balanced. The problem is just the way that we play, and if you actually change Zapdos, say, goal scoring time is shorter, or goal scoring time is reduced, it takes longer to actually score the goals, maybe, okay, it's like half or thirds the time it needs to score, this will do far more harm than good, because it will actively negate the point of Zapdos. Even if they reduce the amount of points Zapdos gives everyone, that wouldn't make a difference, because people go into the Zapdos fight with nearly full Eos energy, that the amount of points received from Zapdos kind of just go wasted. That's why when you look at the Zapdos arena, there's so many points on the ground. People who get them don't actually have the space to just fall on the ground. If people are going into the Zapdos arena with 30, 40 points, well, they only get, say, 20 of those, but they lose 10. Or they're going in with a full 50, and they don't pick up the 20. So removing or even decreasing that wouldn't realistically change much. The only change that realistically I think would be beneficial is the time at which Zapdos spawns. If perhaps they change the double score zone to be 2.5 minutes from the end of the game, and Zapdos appears at maybe 1.5 minutes from the end of the game, then I think we'll see a significantly better reception of Zapdos, because it allows far more time in the double score zone without the pressure of needing to fight Zapdos. Something like this would more benefit and more fulfill the purpose of Zapdos, and really highlight it really was just us playing poorly. Or even alternatively keep this current timer as it is for end of 2 minutes, but push Zapdos into the last minute of gameplay, or even potentially the last 30 seconds of gameplay. Basically making a time difference of double score zone, then Zapdos in double score zone, highlights how important Zapdos actually is, and shows it really is just us not putting any focus on scoring outside of post-Zapdos, in most cases. Because it just feels like when Zapdos spawns in, we all kind of lose our heads and focus, oh, we have to go fight Zapdos. Removing that prevents us from losing our heads, and it keeps the focus much more clearly. And for people who are much more coordinated, it isn't as much of a problem for Zapdos, but it is for the not necessarily lower ranked players, but players who maybe are not as immersed in the game, they are not as familiar with the way the game works. Getting called out by people and things like that, it actively hinders them, and it actually is continuing to perpetuate this problem. We just need to all take a little bit of a chill pill and realize it is a bit better to not have everyone focus on Zapdos immediately. There are better ways of actually handling it, and we can take steps from our play style to do it. I don't think we're actually going to really make any traction, especially with a video like this, because we are quite small. But if you wouldn't mind sharing this out to your friends, letting them know about this and the ways of actually beating Zapdos much easier, that would mean truly the world to me. And if you guys like what you see here, please do not forget to like and subscribe. Comment any other videos you'd like me to make discussions about, as I do have a backlog of things I would like to work on. And I'm always happy to make more of these discussion videos. I know you guys love them, and I love making them myself. Couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and let's rock and roll.